Walking the Contours by Mark Spruce, written in March 2026. Contours! Contours, 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 to paraphrase Vivian from The Young Ones. They are the secret to finding interesting walks in the local area. The closer the contours, the steeper the hill. The steeper the hill, the greater the view. I love a decent view. That's a bit more challenging to find if you live on the edge of Lincolnshire, but nevertheless, hills can be found. My renewed love of walking came through a chance conversation at a wake of all things. Talking to a chap there who I'd never met before, he introduced me to the concept of tumps. Tumps, you say? What the hell are tumps? Well, it's an acronym for 30 upward metre projection. I can't think of a more nerdy title in my life, but the idea is that one or more people have plotted across the whole of the UK all the hills that are 30 metres higher than the surrounding countryside. 90 feet, in other words. They're not huge, they're not Scottish Munros or mountains, but they're enough to provide a view. So, following that introduction, I came home and I logged on to the Tumps website. I'll put a link in the description in case you might be interested. And I looked to see which ones were in my area around Nottinghamshire and Lincolnshire. The following weekend I headed out to walk up and bag my first tump. Over the course of a year I walked a lot of them. Some were incredibly easy to bag. That's the tumper's term, by the way. Gringley on the Hill, clue in the name, I could virtually drive to the base of, walk up and go, yep, I've bagged that one, lovely view, and on we go. Others took quite a trek to find the summit. The main thing about tumps, though, is it got me into exploring. It got me into going to places I had never been before in my local area. I was amazed at some of the wonderful places I found. An ancient hill fort, a wood filled with wild garlic, and in another wood the ghostly remains of nodding donkeys. Those last ones were part of Britain's biggest top-secret World War II onshore oil field. They're still there. Those silent sentinels to a wartime fuel emergency are still there after 80 years. Tucked away in the middle of a lovely wood, barely half an hour's drive from my house. I had no idea. I went out and explored, and it was absolutely fantastic to realise and discover what there was to be found virtually on my own doorstep. The great walks, the villages and the views. It was amazing. Once I had walked most of my local tumps, I wanted to find other walks that didn't necessarily involve a tump, but did involve a view. This is where we come back to contours. Now, on the Tump website, there is very handily an Ordnance Survey view, which you can zoom into anywhere and see where all the footpaths are. So what I do is I look up the map, look for places where there are potentially some hills, places where the contours seem to be relatively close together. Then I'll look for footpaths in that area, and then I will plot a circular route. Ideally one that starts and therefore ends in a village that has a pub, as it's nice to end with a pint. One thing to check though at this point is whether the pub will actually be open at lunchtime on the day of walking. Quite a few I have found these days do not open at lunchtime during weekdays. On an early walk I was coming to the end and practically salivating at the thought of that pint, only to discover the pub was closed. Deeply disappointing, and I now always check online before confirming my planned route. Once I've decided on my route, I take a screen grab off the page of my desktop and print out a paper version of my walk. I also take a photo of the screen on my phone so I can zoom in for extra detail. I take with me a small rucksack containing a bottle of water, an energy bar, or a penguin, hat, sunglasses, a light waterproof top and some binoculars. Definitely take the binoculars. So with all that, I set off for my destination and the start of my walk. Driving there, I always get a thrill of excitement setting out into the unknown. Now don't get me wrong, this is not the darkest Amazon or an Indiana Jones adventure, but it still has the thrill and anticipation of what I might come across whilst walking. The fun really for me is to use the map, follow the route, look at the features in the landscape, get my bearings and use my brain to work out where I am and where I'm headed next. The picture on my phone can be useful on occasions, just to zoom in and confirm, for instance, which side of a hedge the path should follow. Of course, when all else fails, the phone can be used to check my location, but I only do that as a last resort. The idea and the fun is to test myself, not only in the distance walked, but in the orienteering of myself across the landscape. Another point to remember is one I discovered on my first walk. I didn't take a printed map and just relied on my phone. And hey, guess what? In some parts of the countryside you cannot get a phone signal. Rookie error, I guess. I never did that again. So, if you're not sure exactly where you are, you have to stop and look around at the landscape. That clump of trees to my right must be Billy Roos Wood. That distant house to my left must be Bleak House. On the way out of the next village, I will keep walking between Bosom Hill and the Wilderness before heading back to Carlton's Scroop. These are real names on the map picture on this spruce cast. They're just a few examples of some of the exotic place names you can come across when you're out in the countryside and looking closely at your printed map. I once came across Pocket Handkerchief Lane. In the main, most of the walks I've been on so far have been clearly visible and well signposted, with waymarkers, stiles and the like. Just occasionally though, I have found myself in the middle of the countryside, and where my map says there should be a footpath across the next field, I'm faced with a 6-foot-high field of maize. Or, where my map shows a footpath across a stream, I've got there to find the little bridge rotted and collapsed into the ditch. On these occasions, all you can do is compromise, look at the map and find the best way around to get back onto the chosen route. Negotiating these blocks is all part of the fun for me, although I admit they can be a bit annoying on occasions. Another thing about plotting your own route to explore is that you only occasionally meet other walkers. You have the countryside mostly to yourself. These places are not the honeypots that so many congregate around. I once found myself walking up Mam Tor in Derbyshire on a bank holiday weekend. I trudged along in single file behind masses of other walkers on their way to the summit. The view was great, but the slowly ascending line ahead made me think I was part of a reenactment of Chairman Mao's Long March. Following my own path is much more to my liking. Yet another great thing about these walks is the wildlife you come across. Apart from the expected fields of cows and sheep, it is those chance encounters you sometimes get with the real wildlife of our countryside that is so rewarding. Often, walking across an open field, I am accompanied by the sound of skylarks. Passing through a wood, there will be the sound of other birds, and sometimes the unmistakable sound of crows cawing. Looking up, I often see a majestic kite circling high up on a thermal, moving seemingly effortlessly across the sky. Recently, I saw 2 mad March hares chasing each other across a field and stopping occasionally to stand on their hind legs and box each other. It's a wonderful sight. Deer have also crossed my path on occasions, but perhaps the most memorable encounter was with a fox. I was walking along a path through a wood when all of a sudden a big dog fox walked out from the undergrowth no more than 50 yards ahead of me and just sat nonchalantly on the path looking straight at me. I froze, hardly daring to breathe, and we eyeballed each other. I was all full of mystic mumbo-jumbo about this very special encounter. He was probably thinking, grey-haired old bugger, not armed, and I can easily outrun him. I'll just sit here for a moment and give him a good look over. It was an intense, magical moment. I'm guessing we faced each other for maybe a minute before he grew bored of the encounter and without any hurry stood up and walked on into the undergrowth on the other side of the path. That meeting felt like a privilege. My audience with fantastic Mr. Fox. Eventually, if all goes to plan, I get back to my starting point and hopefully a decent pint and a bag of crisps. Sitting in a beer garden at the end of the walk, I get a huge sense of satisfaction that I've negotiated the route with just my paper map. Old school. No help from Mr. Musk and his satellites. I've used my brain and my senses to find bits of England that are new to me and are virtually on my doorstep. Away from the honeypots and not that far off the beaten path, the UK is absolutely stuffed with great walks, glorious countryside, beautiful villages and stunning views. You just have to get out there and look for them. If you're interested, then Tumps are a great starting point to discover local places you might never have visited. So, there you go. Local walking, plotting a route and exploring, finding out what is over the next horizon. It's incredibly rewarding and it's all out there to be found. Just follow the contours. Contours, contours, contours. Oh, and pubs. Spruce Casts, an eclectic collection of anecdotes, reflections and stories by Mark Spruce.